And I think one of the more important interviews in your documentary series was with Carl De Niro. He was someone who was a victim. He was shot in the head by the son of Sam. And there was one point in the documentary where he said something essentially like Maury was obsessed with this case. And he was like, wait, and Maury said something to the effect of, this is my case. And then Carl goes, wait, no, it's my case. I mean, I was the one who was shot in the head. I mean, when Carl did say that he believes there are other shooters, does that, when you heard that, I mean, what did you think when you're hearing that from a victim? Did that solidify Maury's case to you?
It solidified Maury's obsession. But also, yes, Carl still continues to believe that there were other people involved. He was may have been shot by somebody else. The other problem is that we have David Berkowitz himself. David Berkowitz is an enigma. And David Berkowitz, I think, likes to become the center of attention, not from a narcissist standpoint, but from I just want to be seen standpoint. And so I think he also sometimes feels danger in jail or sometimes not. So he tends to change his story. And that story has changed over the years. Originally, he was the only one. Then he said there were others involved. Then he said he's the only one. Then he says the others are involved. So David Berkowitz has a hand as well in perpetuating the mythology and of the case. So that way people never really know the truth. And that's what makes it an endless rabbit hole.
And do you think there's benefit in speaking with people who are convicted of such heinous crimes like David Berkowitz? Because as you said, he's changed his story time and time again over decades. Even in a 2017 interview with Dateline, he kind of dangled a carrot a bit. He left the door open. He said, let's just say essentially there are demons here. And he didn't say no when asked if he was the lone shooter. I mean, do you think there's a benefit in interviewing him? Or do you think there's a benefit maybe more so in focusing more on the victims? Where do you fall?
I think it's very important. First, I'm glad that true crime has evolved. The question is, has it evolved in the right way or the wrong way? Right? So it's gotten a lot crazier, but at the same time, it has gotten a lot more victim-centric. I don't think I would have been as involved in this case if Carl De Niro, the victim, wasn't around, if he didn't believe that he was shot by somebody else. I think a lot of people who still look at the case feel a kinship to Carl, and the fact that he hasn't had closure is important. So that is an important thing, I think, in terms of what's going on. As for David, I don't know, because you mentioned a 2017 interview. There's depositions going back 50 years where he said other people were involved. He's listed people's names who other people are involved. The other thing that I think is a big issue is just because somebody says something in public or sends you an email with some information that you believe, the question is, can you prove it? That really becomes the issue. Can you prove it?
That is a huge issue. And you post on your podcast that this case really is, what do you believe and why? And before we get to what you believe and why, there have been so many documentaries on the son of Sam. One just came out the past month, and I've watched both. I watched your documentary series. I also watched that one, and they're two totally separate series. I mean, it's almost like you're watching something on a different case, really. Both, I mean, fascinating. Yours lays out Maury's full theory there. I mean, how, as a documentarian, do you see this case that's infamous for decades, and you decide, here's how I can approach that differently? I mean, what's that like? Because this is a story that's told again, and you found a unique angle to retell it.
It's almost like being a detective yourself in some respects. So Maury Terry has this, and I knew Maury Terry. I would speak to Maury Terry. When Maury Terry was alive, he was always asking me, please do a documentary about this case. And I said, Maury, I don't know if I can. You're too invested in your own story. To be a good documentarian, you have to be open to all possibilities. So as a documentarian, I wanted to be open to all possibilities. Could Son of Sam have acted alone? Could Son of Sam had acted with other individuals? Could there be a satanic cult? Could it be not a satanic cult, but really about the mob and pornography and sex and drugs, which is what usually is? So I wanted to go at it from all these different angles, but it's what I liked is going down all these different rabbit holes to see what was legitimate or what was not. Obviously, as we say, if there's smoke, there's fire. But again, can you prove it?
And I mean, personally, I live in New York City. I know the Son of Sam case. I'm a true crime person who's been consuming this content for decades. And I came in, honestly, watching your series thinking there was one shooter. And Maury Terry laid out a very compelling case. In that time, when you were looking at that, I mean, did you go from, I think there was one shooter to, I believe Maury Terry a bit here and there? I mean, what was the one piece of evidence to you that kind of changed everything?
That's a great question. I don't think it was one piece, but there was a number of pieces. First of all, if you have a number, and not one crazy old school NYPD guy, but a number of NYPD guys whispering to you like, look, there was more to the case than, what we put out in the public. That kind of sets your spidey sense going, saying, what is it? Then you read Maury Terry's book, and Maury, it almost reads like a thriller. I knew there was no way that this could completely 100% be true, but again, you know that there's nuggets that are true, and you're like, okay, let's look at those nuggets. And there were some compelling issues. There were, and of course, obviously everybody might say, victim statements, eyewitness sketches, unreliable. Completely agree. However, if you look at those and look at them against the Carr brothers, becomes very interesting. Then if you start to look at other interesting facts, how could he be all these different places at once? Then you start to look at the letters, and the letters themselves. There's really some interesting information buried in the letters. He's calling himself the Son of Sam. Well, where does he get that? Obviously from a neighbor, Sam Carr. Then if you look at Sam Carr's children, I mean, Sam Carr's kids, John Carr and Michael Carr, they both died. One committed suicide. And before he committed suicide, he said, I have some information that the police are going to want to know. The police never interviewed the quote, Son of Sam. I find that to be very interesting. Why didn't they interview him? Because he has died, committed suicide. But there's just too much about John Carr and Michael Carr and the Carr family and Berkowitz's relationship with the Carr family. They live just down the block. There's far too much for it to be 100% coincidence. And as detectives love to tell you, there is no such thing as coincidence. I agree. Now, the question is, how involved were they? And I think that's where I really get into it. Were they one shooter, two shooters? Was it three kind of kids, almost, if you will, just wanting to be nihilist in the 70s and kind of cause havoc and chaos? Could be. Was it part of a larger cult? Maybe. Was the cult just theatrics and it was really about sex, drugs, and rock and roll? Probably.
So you're still questioning, was it a cult? Was it not a cult? I mean, both Carr brothers are dead. Do you think that anyone you think could have been involved, do you think they're still alive? Do you think they're still involved in crime if there are multiple people? I mean, what does that look like to you?
I think it looks like a bunch of folks in the 1970s who were probably involved in some pretty dark stuff. Whether they were dabbling, they call them dabblers, whether they were dabbling in devil worshiping, what does that really mean? Is it everybody just hanging out in the woods, listening to Metallica? Is it everybody, wearing robes? Is it, I've spoken to cops who are still alive who investigated the case, and they said to me, it was very interesting. They're like, look, it's all theatrics for sex. And when you look at it like that, it kind of makes sense. It was all just theatrics to kind of get people together to have sex and or to do bad things, go sell drugs, commit other crimes, pornography, what have you. And then the question is, when you get the mob in there, and I think this is one interesting thing. Maury Terry wrote The Ultimate Evil in, I forget, 87, I think. He was early in the case. His ideas changed. What he thought the case was really about changed. And that happens to me too, whether it's the Long Island serial killer case, whether it's the Cropsey documentary that I did. your ideas change about what the crime is really about. And I think as he got older in life, he realized it was more about the mob and kind of a darker influence of the mob, whether it was like hits for profit or what have you.